Flooding the Blight Swamp underway with warp fire was quite a large job. Khazran thought that Oldor wouldn't really go through with it, especially after assurances were given that the Legion would return home within a week. However, the idea of leaving only spurred the warp-drunk Dawi to brew their explosives ever quicker. For if they were to not be present, they would need to create a blast that could be seen all the way from Atalan. Hardly any point otherwise, is there? Indeed, the notion that the project had started as a trap to foil a Chaos counterattack was long forgotten. That counterattack was mustering to the south and east of the swamp, where the approaches were just about suitable for large encampments. The two camps combined were larger than Skavenblight itself, housing 50,000 warriors one day, 60,000 the next. By the time the week's wait was over, it was 100,000. It was the greatest concentration of Chaos troops yet achieved, in service of a grand mission. In some unseen drama of another world, the central clique of the Chaos gods had discovered the machinations of the great horned rat, and now put their purging of the mortal realm aside for a time to attend to business closer to home, so to speak. In mortal terms, the Chaos forces converged on the Blight Swamp from far and wide, high and low. To actually reach Skavenblight would be the first challenge. The fires of Chaos magic cleared away the undergrowth and boiled the swamps, while trolls and giants ploughed up the earth into clayish highways in front of the armoured columns. Long strips of land were burned across the Blight, pounded down into solid tracks by the stamping of Chaos boots. Such stamping echoed in the underway below, albeit much less than in an empty underway. Having foregone sleep for the prior week, the Dawi had achieved the complete incendiary flooding of the underway close to the city, and the lining of the ceiling with warp-fire bombs in the tunnels further out. Behind their party trailed a set of silver wires, freshly forged. They were reeled out with each step, creating a long conducting connection between Oldor's party and the sparking battery packs floating in the warp-fire pools below the city. The armies above and below passed each other without incident, both busy with their own projects as they marched. "I can't wait! I can't wait!" Oldor muttered as his landcrawler trundled along. He had the detonators at his side. They exchanged whispers in quiet moments. He knew he couldn't touch it yet, though. He needed to escape to the planned vantage point. This was at the coast, where the underway forked vertically. One tunnel led to the surface, the other to a passage below the Talayan Sea. Both were of use, but the surface called first. During this time, the Chaos army caught sight of Skavenblight. Its streets were concealed by a yellowish fog rising from the mud. Chaos troops were no strangers to mysterious fogs, and thought little of it. They began to establish a camp in and around the city, preparing for their great mission into the warrens below. The absence of the Dawi was much complained about, although it was reasoned they could be guarding the lair of the horned rat. There was probably not a single mind among that host that knew precisely what they were going down below to do, only that they'd been instructed by the very gods to find and destroy whatever was making the upstart deity so powerful of late. And by thinking long and hard on this objective, they sealed their own fate. The power of any being of chaos was drawn from a most temperamental source, the belief of mortal minds. It stands to reason, then, that the larger the army sent to hunt the horned rat, the more powerful the rat would become. And indeed, the impossibility of finding anything of particular significance to the cause in the Infinite Under Empire meant that the Chaos warriors were stressing day and night to come up with a way to please their masters, dreaming up fresh powers and domains for the enemy god, that in turn began to manifest in mortal and chaos spaces alike. Could this have been the true plan of the rebellious rat? We cannot know, and need not. The schemes of all present at Skavenblight in those times all overlooked the importance of military engineering, so the chronicles say. There was a pulse below the swamp. There was just enough time for one to realize that they were suddenly airborne, before the rising ground below split and burst out in a rocketing storm of green flame, turning mud and metal to dust in an instant. The swamp, said to be a sore upon the land, was fractured into a flying, searing smog that rose above the fleeing clouds in seconds. The shockwave uprooted trees, crashed lakes and rivers into the air, and quickly even unfooted an army of gawking Dawi. From the coast, the great explosion had been too bright to bear witness to and too glorious to miss. Stinging eyes and churning stomachs only intensified the emotion of the triumph. "Much better than expected," Story marvelled. "Should have sent out the gyrocopters to see how many we got," Oldor nodded to himself. "It undid the very earth," Kathran said, holding his goggles over his eyes with both hands. That wasn't even possible. It should have been a collapse, not an explosion." "You sound almost disappointed," Oldor said. "I do think we'd benefit from being a little further away, though it pains me to say it." "Pains me to hear it. We'll have no more of your complaining on the way back, eh?" "There is one thing," Kathran began, although his point was made clear right away when a gush of flames erupted from the nearby underway exit and melted the side of a cliff. Magma slumped into the hissing sea. The dwarves hollered their approval at this turn of events, then got knocked off their feet for a second time when the pressure wave of the explosion suddenly kicked up a roaring gale. One of the gyrocopters flipped over and span into the growing basin of magma. The air was searing hot, and the tumbling of armoured Dawi managed to set off the black powder cartridges strapped to their waists. Some were killed, while most roared their further joys at the blackening sky. "We have to leave," Kathran insisted, and there in that moment of madness, Oldor turned to look him in the eye with a streak of forgotten clarity. "Yes, I do think so too," he said plainly, clapping Kathran on the shoulder. The Legion picked itself up and gathered together the massive number of broken rifles suddenly accrued. One of the land crawlers was on its side, and the smashed gyrocopter and its crew were beyond rescue. The quietening of the wind, followed by the buffering counterwind filling the void, brought about an end to the celebratory mood. With little more being said, they returned to the scorched underway and disappeared into the still resonating earth. Far away, the Blight Swamp was more of a sore than ever, stripped of its surface to leave only burning rock. The magma witnessed by the Dawi was nothing compared to the ocean of brilliant fire that flowed down into the Skaven Undercity, consuming all as it cooled. Not only was Skaven Blight completely wiped away, but plenty of the tunnels leading away from the swamp were sealed by freshly baked walls of stone. In those stones, upon close inspection, were streaks of chaos steel. The mad scheme had worked, in several senses. The great horned rat had got its way for a brief time, enjoying enormous consideration from the mortals. This empowered it so much that the warp fire its magic enabled went far beyond expectation, sealing the fate of the Chaos Army. This, in turn, robbed the rat of its power, with the clogging of the Skaven metropolis sealing the fate of countless millions of would-be ratty worshippers to boot. In this sense, the other Chaos Gods had got their way. The loss of 100,000 troops was nothing to be smug about, although some chaotic entities weren't so fussy about who exactly did the dying so long as there was some. But the crushing of the Horned Rat's seat of power proved that the central clique of chaos was in charge, until another of them thought of a cunning ruse to employ, at least. As you might already be wondering, the fall of the Horned Rat was going to do no favours to those who were relying on his magical gifts. That thought didn't disturb the Dawi, who were busy marching double time through the Leaky to lay an underway. They preferred to think of how the scheme had served them, and indeed it had. A Chaos Army of unknown size was gone, and so were some troublesome rats, no doubt. They actually underestimated how many Chaos troops they had killed. On the other hand, they underestimated just how many Chaos troops there were at large in the world, and what those troops were going to do when news of their devious involvement in serious Chaos politics was spread around. Furthermore, they imagined their apocalyptic ploy had taken out some of the Chaos leadership, perhaps even the real or other Archon. Not so, for those truly gifted by Chaos had known better than to dabble in the civil strife of their patrons, or had quietly foreseen the outcome of the whole affair. So it was that across the entire world, Chaos armies now arranged for journeys long and short to reach the irrelevant land of Atalan. In this, they and the Dawi were of one mind. There were 2 other contestants in the race to the Desert Holds, which was soon to prove a stroke of blind luck for Oldor. This new affair begins at the docks of Sartosa. Oldor's army had crossed Telea and come to an island at the end of the Telean Peninsula. It was previously a lawless bastion of pirates and necromancers. Now it was a battleground for Norse warriors and the Chaos cultists born from the local Umgi, engaging in constant street brawls, assassinations, and backstabbing plots. In other words, Sartosa had not changed a bit. One day, those uneasy bedfellows looked up to see a wing of gyrocopters buzz down into the city docks and pour out hammer-wielding Golden Guard legionaries. These veterans, used to beating up dragon ogres and chaos champions, turned the poorly fed crowds of bruisers into a bloody display along the dockside. With enemy escape thus prevented, the rest of the legionaries entered the town on the landward side, slaying quickly any who cared to resist. Those more sensible were corralled into the large paved square beside the lavish governor's mansion. They stood in a clump, looking not so different to the gangs of Umgi taken to Myrmidons, although thinner. Some of the dwarves inspected them and dragged a few quivering individuals off, those branded with the marks of one closely held by chaos magic. "You see anything?" Story asked Kazran. "Not really," Kazran shrugged. "There's a chance we can bring them out. Bring them back." "No, there isn't," Oldor insisted from behind. "Not enough ships." "I meant from their corruption." "As did I. Can't happen here, and so it can't happen at all. They've preachers among them, I presume." "I imagine so, my lord," Story said. "Have them deliver whatever sermons are required. Master Engineer, see what craft are fit to carry the land crawlers. I'll handle the requisitioning." "If we're to take their food and ease their minds with chaos verse, I say we may as well be done with them now. The dead don't hide their food or summon the attention of the hidden gods." "Do what I said, Thane." "As you wish. Perhaps they'll consider execution by starvation a form of mercy instead." "It's a mercy for us, Thane." "I hope you're right." "He's right. You're right, my lord," Kazran added, but Oldor simply waved him off to his duties. Provisions and vessels for an escape were procured. Only the large docked ships could carry the landcrawlers and gyrocopters safely, so most of the infantry were forced to cram themselves into little sailboats. The Dwarven distaste for water travel proved an impediment more stalling than fear of battle had ever been. Yet after a day of hard work, a fleet of 50 rope-linked ships and boats bobbed off towards the south, with Dawi impatiently rowing away their anxiety at all hours. The survivors in Sartosa were left to see to the rotting remains of the slain, the only food left. Land quickly disappeared astern, although the dark fog of the vaporized swamp stained the northern horizon. Aside from this, the uniform blueness of the ocean, with all its playful dells and rises, seemed like another world. At night especially, the realm was like an empty vessel into which one's thoughts could be dispensed and stirred around. It was a quiet unlike anything experienced for months, a quiet unblemished by formless whispers from another space. "Cromson, I feel a little unwell," Oldor said to Kazran one night. "Then you're in good company," Kazran said. "Little to be done about it until we're on stable ground. Or better yet, under it." Aye. Reminds me, we've been in these parts before, haven't we? Years back now. And what happened to us then? Oh, you're worried about the monster in the sea? Monster? What monster? The monster that knocked us off course to Atalan in the first place. No such thing, is there? By the gods, more of this chaos illness. I'll have to remember how it really was for us all, start to finish, won't I? If you remember so well, then let's compare notes, Oldor said with a grin and an advancing lean. The way I remember it, you were asked to join our expedition by the Lords, perhaps even the High King, and given a simple task, to make sure we failed. So when our hull was strangely torn open by forces unknown, you were doing just what you were supposed to. That's what I remember. Kazran was completely still. You might think Oldor was experiencing another dream of chaotic birth, yet such things were hardly possible amid the freshness of night so far from the tumult of the shore. Kazran moved as if he was about to leave, then bounced back. It's not really like that, he said. They didn't want you to fail. They just thought that you would, whether they sent someone to meddle or not. So they asked me. I don't believe you even have me bringing this up, my lord. Believe it. Don't worry. I owe you. We owe you. I'll tolerate anything but a lie, Crumpson. So be it. It's true then. They made me sabotage the ship, but not out of any true spite, really. What they wanted was for you to not end up so far away that they couldn't come rescue you when the expedition went awry. That way they could show you up and get over your song and dance back at Karazakarak, or just your engineering style in general. You could interpret that as a kindness of sorts. That's my choice to make or not. Aye, aye. Well, since you've reckoned it out, I should give you my formal apology. Nay, keep it. You need a reward. Everything we've achieved here was because of you, after all. God's work and all that. The gods indeed. The right ones, I hope. Never one for putting much faith in the gods. That's just not engineering. But it worked out all the same. So the only apology should be from me to them. Feel like I've been a little funny these past months, I suppose. I'm sorry if I've been causing trouble. It's chaos, my lord. Causing trouble is the least we should expect. And I think we avoided it mostly, depending on... Thorgrin? Yes, that. Aye. Starting to remember a few things about that. Planning on stopping. If only I could sabotage the journey of your mind as easily as that of a ship. Philosophical, ain't that? Fortunately not. It's okay, my lord. In Atalan we'll all feel renewed. Feel like you mean? That's not really what I meant. Only it seems that the only one who's getting through this okay is you. Must ask, what's your secret? I can't answer that. It just never came to me. Never heard what you heard, felt the pull. Or maybe I just didn't feel it any more or less than usual. I suppose I'm pulled in all sorts of directions all the time in my line of work. Nagashi magic and the Skaven alchemy. Throw in chaos and it might just cancel out like waves from opposite sides of a pool. You'd best get to writing some of this down. I think we need to get to the bottom of it, and then put the truth to use. Oh, so you've some engineering left in you yet, Kazran smiled. I keep it quiet, don't I? Oldor nodded. For the first time in months, the two shook hands. The coming of morning brought great alarm among the fleet. In the dawn twilight, it was clear that they were not alone. To the rear, 3 strips of pirate longboats were advancing, and more sail cut a jagged horizon all around. Norsey, and those ships at the front are metal, Story reported. I think the Chaos Army propers started prowling out here. I hope they didn't go to all that effort on our account. International effort, this end times business, Oldor said. Shame to put them out of said business, but we've land to reach. Crumpson, the rockets. There was a cocky attitude among the Dawi, for indeed the approach of ships could be easily countered with warp fire. Where it was effective on land, it was doubly or triply so at sea, since even the most glancing blow could start a raging fire across a whole ship. Thus, when the first longships approached close at the rear, the rockets jetted off to meet them. They made it perhaps halfway, before the propelling burn sputtered out and the rockets splashed into the ocean. Firing dads! Oldor shouted out. No, I think... try again, Kazran said to the bombardiers. Another volley was loaded and released, with similar results. Short range, and a few that went off mid-flight had hardly any punch to them. Warp fire was normally happy to burn on water's surface, but now it just got lapped under the bobbing waves like ordinary fire oil. "It's not working!" Kazran despaired. "The magic. It's gone," Story reasoned. Oldor was quiet for a moment, looking around and funneling his beard through his hands. The ships behind were closing, and those all around were running interception courses, sailing fast and high in the water. Then he said, "Get the boys ready. This'll be something new."